Hello everyone and welcome to round number 4 of our July 1v1 tournament. This time we've got Dubin and Gameslayer has returned to us. Blues was of course substituting for him earlier, so it's nice to see that he will be earning his own victories or losses at this point. Oh, this is a tempting scientific location that I'm looking at right away. There is even a decent water and iron price. I mean, you could maybe even just drop like an iron mine, double steel, then move into like a water pump, and there are just things to do there. I want to see somebody found there. Dubin is actually going to be the one to take it, but he takes it as a scavenger, choosing to go after 2 of the high carbon locations. Worth paying attention to that there were several high carbon locations available, but no adjacency on them. However, if you think about it, 2 high carbons without adjacency, still better than 2 low carbons with adjacency. And we've seen a willingness to take that already in this tournament, so no big surprise to see these highs taken as well. Underground nukes are available this game against our scavenger. That's something we're going to have to pay attention to. And Gameslayer, he is also in a position where he is forced to rely on medium and low iron rather than the high because, of course, Dubin found it in the middle of all those highs. Now, Dubin is going to be able to throw down water and farms pretty easily. However, one of the definite downsides to Scavenger this game is that our expensive resources were water, iron, and oxygen and electronics. Those were our expensive resources, I believe. And everything else is either normal or low in terms of cost. And this is going to mean that our scavenger is not making as much money as they would like to at the start of this game. I'm a little nervous about Gameslayer here. Gameslayer, I'd say, has made a pretty distinct mistake. I mean, we can all see it right now, right? These steel mills are just losing money. In that, when you have 2 mines and they're medium and low, that's actually not enough iron to power your steel mills. Now, he's actually okay for the moment because he has developed a large stockpile of iron. So he's not technically losing money yet, but that iron price is moving up and that steel price is moving down. And so Gameslayer is going to have to look to do something about that before too terribly long in order to stay profitable in this area. Gameslayer was also trying to make glass a bit expensive, it seems, forced Dubin to buy it a little bit more expensively. However, the nice thing for Dubin is that even though he can't make money easily, he doesn't need to make that much money because glass did start inexpensive. Glass started at $40. And so it's very, very cheap to purchase. So, you know, you're not making a whole lot of money, but you don't need a whole lot of money. So you're probably going to be okay overall. But if we look, these farms only pulling in 18 instead of maybe the expected 50 or 60 that we'll sometimes see early in the game for a scavenger. Now, the water pumps are still doing quite well, of course, with all their adjacency, but that is going to just aid Gameslayer a little bit potentially as he tries to move into these reactors. Unfortunately for Gameslayer, fuel gets surplused as he's trying to make this transition, which makes everything just more difficult for him. Might be looking long-term at electronics, but unfortunately for Gameslayer, Dubin kind of already took all of the best carbon that was available, especially nearby. There is a medium quite a long ways away, but this is going to make electronics production difficult for Gameslayer long-term. Thing is, for Dubin right now, having 6 carbon coming in is a lot. And I mean a lot. And so he's using some of this to establish a geothermal plant. That's definitely something I agree with. And the other thing is, once again, he might be able to get away with this because of the cheap glass that's available. He will be able to continue committing this ridiculous amount of carbon that he has to upgrades far more easily than in a game where glass started off at an expensive price or even a normal price. Especially with his opponent as a robot, that glass price is not moving up quickly. There are also no warehouse down right now. So all of these factors are kind of playing into Dubin's playstyle right now and letting him make some of these plays that in a more normal game, in a more standard game, would have very, very different effects on how the game actually played out, right? Having 6 carbon per second is a ridiculous amount, typically, right? An excessive amount, committing 3 claims. Oftentimes a completely excessive amount. He might be able to get away with it better here, though, because of the particulars of this game. We are seeing a transition into electrolysis reactors out of Dubin. I am kind of curious if electrolysis reactors are best. They probably are. Electronics, though, are looking kind of tempting if you can get a hold of some silicon, which shouldn't be all that difficult. There is plenty of silicon on the map. However, it is all in that northwest corner. And so it is separate. Oh no, Dubin's got a decent source in this southeast corner here, so this shouldn't be too difficult for Dubin at all. So he's got good water, good aluminum, good carbon, and good silicon all nearby. Once again, these scavengers just finding these nice resource locations. He even has access to iron if he wanted it. Although that's not going to be a huge deal for him this game, I would say. Alright, chemicals are going to start going up in price with that new laboratory. Probably not a huge deal, but worth paying attention to. Also worth paying attention to is the fact that power has managed to get up to $300 for these players. I thought GameSlayer had moved into double solar panel, but it looks like he's just on one for the moment. Maybe he did just move into one. Dubin, with that geotherm established, has managed to cover his power costs. I would not be surprised if he does something like move into silicon double solar panel right now, though. That seems like a fairly straightforward move. He's got 68,000 debt to pay through, going into some farms over here. All right, that's absolutely fine. The electrolysis was not making a lot of money, and on top of that, the electrolysis was consuming a lot of power. And so this maybe opens up the opportunity for him to more easily move into some more power. He even might have the option... I'm not sure if this is a graphical glitch or reality here. Sometimes you'll get these caverns that are actual graphical glitches, and that may be what's going on here. No, wind is strong here. We're okay. And so we are going to see just double wind turbine out of him. Also entirely reasonable. Wind turbines are a lot cheaper than solar panels, of course, and with this little cavern right next to him, he is going to be able to have a strong wind tile and a weak wind tile next to each other. That should be enough power that he can start making some money off of it even before too terribly long. Gonna combine that with an adrenaline boost, but gets frozen immediately. That is the danger of the adrenaline boost instead of the goon squad. Goon squadding that strong solar panel was definitely the correct play there. And GameSlayer, he was on it, he was watching for it, he knew exactly what was going on, and he got aggressive right at that exact moment that he needed to. That's a hard thing to do because GameSlayer is in kind of this opposite position from Dubin this whole game, right? He had a little bit of an expensive time in some ways making steel because iron started so expensive, things were a little bit weird for him. And then on top of that, electronics started off very, very expensive this game. It's totally different from the glass starting off very, very cheap, and that's made it difficult for him to push through upgrades. You can see he's also struggling to make money. And so with that very, very expensive electronic price, he is struggling to make money. And you can also see that just operating on this medium iron is not enough to actually have his steel mill stay effective. These are operational, but actively costing money, without a doubt right now. Especially because he has no iron stored up, and he has a large steel stockpile. So this is just a problem for GameSlayer, and he is struggling through this game, to say the least. This power surge was absolutely necessary, pretty much no matter the price, against Dubin. But it was very, very costly for GameSlayer, and you can see that he is struggling to continue to move forward this game. Solar panels will be turning off in just a moment here, but GameSlayer, he has gotten the cash together to hit HQ4. Very, very important for him to do. He needs some more iron. He's going to move into that mine right now. That's also very, very important for him to do. Now, he could look at potentially moving into some electrolysis once again pretty easily. As food is dying off, he might even want to scrap his food. Maybe think about moving into electronics. Once again, a dangerous thing to do against Dubin, as Dubin has control of all this carbon, but Dubin has been kind enough to knock that carbon price quite low, so it is still potentially an option here to start buying up carbon and get a good stockpile going so you can produce electronics based off of that stockpile for a while and easily progress through your upgrades. And we are going to see GameSlayer moving into electronics, and he is going to develop a small stockpile of carbon as well. This might signal to Dubin, you know, what's going on in GameSlayer's head, but GameSlayer should manage to make a decent amount of money off of this. And on top of that, steel's pretty cheap, so actually building these electronics factories is not all that expensive. Meanwhile, Dubin, he's working quite well. His wind turbines are now defended, at least partially, so that the electrolysis reactors and the wind turbines cannot be knocked out at the same time. Power has come down in price, but you can see Dubin's paid off almost all of his debt. He's still paying it off, 600 a second right now from the geotherms combined with the wind turbines. And so Dubin, he hasn't even been making money off of power just yet, but that is going to kick in right now. The electrolysis reactors get frozen out, so that's 150 that Dubin isn't making per second. Dubin also, it's worth pointing out, did pick up cold fusion. This is a game where cold fusion, I'd say, is absolutely massive as power price got out of control. You can see that it's right here. Pick that up off of a patent. And so Dubin has been able to maintain a ridiculous amount of power production on just these 3 buildings, even with one weak turbine, because of course all of his power consumption is based in water, not power. And he's had access to plenty of water all game. That hasn't been a problem. And life support isn't even all that expensive, so just not a big deal for Dubin paying this water price. And so now making a truly ridiculous amount of money. Gameslayer's still stuck on HQ4. Gameslayer's still stuck in a ton of debt. And Dubin has managed to use this cheap glass price, I would say, very effectively this game. He's had to make a lot of transitions. He's had to pay attention to what's going on. And Gameslayer been in a similar position, but with the expensive electronics price, and I think some mismanagement of production of resources in particular, not enough iron to go around to keep his steel mills active, has definitely caused him a problem. And he's just kind of been lagging behind most of this game. He's catching up. He's up to HQ5. He pushed to that a little bit better than he did 4. He's trying to keep up here, but keeping up with the scavenger typically isn't good enough. We've still got mutinies and adrenaline boosts on the table that the scavenger can use very effectively throughout the rest of this game if we see an off-world transition. And of course, Gameslayer is still in a lot of debt, whereas Dubin still has none. So that's definitely going to be a concern. Dubin moving into a pleasure dome. Not a huge pleasure dome, but with the availability of cold fusion for Dubin, still going to be very, very beneficial. I mean, 114 on a tile. Compare that to the 23 he's willing to do with the electrolysis reactor, or the 47 on electronics factory, right? That's still a great tile right now, just because relatively speaking, there isn't a whole lot of money to be made. So even with just the scavenger and the robot, he's going to be all right with that pleasure dome. We are potentially going to be looking at an off-world to clean up this game. Dubin has enough cash that he can potentially start making a run on Gameslayer before too long, but with this high steel price, I don't know if he would be able to finish it before Gameslayer manages to at least buy up his own stock. And from that point, it would be a bit of a slog to finish based on just these on-world prices. I mean, electronics are already coming down. Steel is going to be maybe, and steel and food, going to be the 2 remaining resources you can make money on for any period of time. Dynamite being auctioned off, Gameslayer's probably not going to be all that happy to see that. On the other hand, he doesn't really have any target that's really great to get hit by dynamite regardless. Dubin is going to start trying to make these purchases now. This is going to force Gameslayer to defend himself. This is a strong move, I would say, because it's going to make Gameslayer commit that money from the steel. He absolutely has to. And Dubin may have enough to go ahead and finish things off. It's close, but he may go ahead and have it. You are vulnerable to a majority buyout. That's an interesting little notification that I haven't seen before. But yeah, Dubin, he's getting there. He's not quite there yet, but he's very, very close. Gameslayer looks like just not quite making enough money. And I think we are probably going to see, yeah, Dubin should be able to finish this up in a majority buyout on this food production. There it is. It was a close thing, but he did manage to push to that. So no off-world market, no extended game this time. Gameslayer just not quite enough coming in order to prevent that majority buyout. He struggled through it, but unfortunately all that debt just made his price so cheap. And Dubin had enough of a lead that he was able to push through and go ahead and finish things up. A difficult struggle for Gameslayer that game. I'd say, though, there was some pretty serious mismanagement of steel in particular, steel and iron in particular. And so that seemed to trip him up pretty quick this game and caused him some pretty serious problems long term, as it'll let him kind of eventually accrue all this debt. He at some point was just straight burning money in his steel mills when he had no iron stockpile and he had a large steel stockpile. It was just a bit of a problematic game for Gameslayer that time, but Dubin executing the situation quite effectively. I really liked how he played out that particular set of random situations, right? The random prices combined with what was going on at the colony. I think Dubin handled that very, very well that game, and so it was a nice, strong win for him. It was a good game to see.